Black CEO, insulted by billionaires, wife at White House Gala by dawn, $4, 9, B was gone. Hello everyone, before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. You people don't belong anywhere near this room. Her voice sliced across the White House Gala like a blade dipped in cold champagne. Dozens of bodies turned at once. Glasses hovered mid-air. The string quartet faltered, a single violin note breaking into silence as if the building itself flinched. At the center of the marble hall, framed by statues of ancient statesmen and a wash of amber light, stood Solène Ward, still as a sculpture carved from midnight stone. She wore a deep emerald satin top, its simplicity sharpening the elegance she carried effortlessly. Arms folded, chin lifted, eyes steady. Across from her, close enough for the heat of anger to radiate, stood Miranda Kessington, the silver-haired wife of a billionaire donor, wrapped in a golden gown that shimmered with the entitlement of old money. Her finger jabbed the space between them as if attempting to puncture Solène's composure. "You heard me," Miranda hissed. "This is a presidential cultural gala, not whatever charity mixer you crawled out of." Gasps rippled through the hall. Some guests pretended to check their phones. Others lifted them, covertly recording, fingers trembling with equal parts excitement and fear. Solène didn't move, not a blink, not a breath wasted. Her stillness unnerved Miranda more than any counterattack ever could. "Don't just stand there," Miranda continued, louder now. "Security should have kept you at the entrance. I swear, these events keep slipping." Her eyes swept Solène up and down like she was inspecting a stain. The crowd felt the temperature shift, cooler, tighter, dangerous. A man in a navy tux whispered under his breath, "Who insults a guest at the White House?" Another murmured, "Does she even know who that woman is?" No one dared step in. Not yet. Solène finally lifted her gaze from Miranda's finger to her eyes, slow, deliberate, dismissive. It was the kind of look that didn't ask for silence. It created it. Before the tension snapped, Solène's voice entered, low and measured. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here." The hall seemed to tighten again, as if inhaling with her. Miranda scoffed. "Oh, please. Don't start acting like the world cares what you have to say." She stepped closer, so close her perfume pushed against the air between them. "You're out of place," she seethed. "You don't have the pedigree. You don't have the background. You don't have the name." Solène's expression didn't shift, not even at the mention of name, a word Miranda wielded like a weapon sharpened over decades. Behind Miranda, the billionaire husband, Charles Kessington, appeared at the edge of the crowd. His face tightened the moment he recognized Solène. But he stayed silent, dread creeping in like a slow-moving shadow. He knew something Miranda didn't, and he knew it was already too late. Phones raised higher, eyes widened. The gala moments ago, a glittering display of power, felt suddenly claustrophobic, air thick with a sense of coming consequence. Miranda jabbed her finger again, this time inches from Solène's collarbone. "Women like you," she said, each word sharpened by privilege, "should remember their place." Solène finally moved. Just her eyes. They shifted toward the recording phones, the statues above, the chandeliers that reflected a glint of gold off her cheekbone, and then back to Miranda's trembling hand. The pause she held was a masterclass in controlled devastation. Then, quietly, calmly, she said, "I remember my place just fine." The room braced, because everyone knew. It wasn't a threat, it was a countdown. For a moment, the hall held its breath, a grand chamber suddenly reduced to a single point of tension suspended between two women. Miranda's fingers still hovered inches from Solène's skin, but something in the air changed, not loudly, not dramatically, but distinctly, like a spotlight narrowing its focus. The first person to sense it was a young congressional aide near the marble pillar. Her posture straightened as if someone had whispered a warning behind her ear. She glanced at Solène, then at Miranda, and her expression tightened with the realization that this was no ordinary guest being humiliated. Across the room, a diplomat subtly lowered his champagne flute, his brows knit. He murmured to his companion, "This might be bigger than she thinks." Miranda didn't notice. She was too consumed with her own echo. "You walk in here dressed like you're attending a charity mixer," she spat, gesturing to Solène Emerald Top. "You think elegance is something you can just buy and wear?" The irony hung like broken crystal because nothing in the room looked more elegant than the woman Miranda was trying to belittle. Solène's stillness shifted the hall again. Not a movement, just gravity. The kind that draws eyes, softens breath, changes the rhythm of a room without saying a word. A member of the press invited to cover the gala raised his phone higher. He wasn't filming Miranda, he was filming Solène, sensing a story not yet spoken. Miranda sneered. "Don't look at me like that. You're not fooling anyone. People like you only get invited here when someone needs a diversity prop, and frankly, they could have picked better." She waited for the crowd to laugh. No one did. The silence that followed was colder than anything Solène had yet spoken. Even the statues behind them seemed to lean inward. Charles Kessington, the billionaire husband, took a slow step forward, hand half raised as if contemplating intervening. His expression wasn't anger or embarrassment. It was dread. He recognized Solène not by her face, but by her calm. Because he had seen that calm once before, across a negotiation table, hours before his company bent under pressure it didn't fully understand. Miranda finally sensed the resistance. She scanned the room, really looking this time, and realized the eyes staring back were not amused, not supportive, not even neutral. They were wary. Of her. "Why is everyone looking at me like that?" she snapped, voice cracking slightly. No answer. Her outrage bounced off the marble columns and died somewhere between the chandeliers and the statues towering above her. Solène didn't speak. She didn't need to. The crowd's shifting stance did it for her. A senator's wife pressed her lips together. A defense contractor cleared his throat and muttered, "Oh no," under his breath. A White House cultural liaison, usually composed, subtly stepped backward, as if instinctively distancing herself from the wrong side of history. Miranda's voice faltered. "Are you all seriously taking her side?" Someone whispered, barely audible, "You don't know who she is, do you?" Miranda whipped around. "What is that supposed to mean?" But no one answered, and that was when the second shift came slower, deeper, like the bass note under a symphony. Solène lifted her chin, her eyes gliding across the hall. Phones, cameras, witnesses, a room full of power observing, judging, recalibrating. Miranda's finger trembled. She pulled it back with a jerk, suddenly aware that the woman she'd been attacking had not only taken the blow, she had absorbed the entire room with her. The insult still hung in the air, but it was already turning, hanging, tilting, reversing direction. And every person present sensed the same unsettling truth. The humiliation was no longer Solène's, it was Miranda's, and it had only begun. Miranda's confidence didn't collapse all at once. It eroded slowly, like the quiet cracking of ice beneath footsteps that believed themselves safe. She clutched her golden shawl tighter, scanning the hall as if expecting anyone to validate her fury. But the eyes watching her had changed shape. What had once been gentle social smiles now glimmered with suspicion and recognition, not of her, of Solène. Because while Miranda saw only an intruder in emerald satin, others saw the unmistakable outline of someone far more dangerous than a political donor's wife dared to antagonize. Near the east pillar, a tech magnate whispered to his aide, "That's her, isn't it?" The aide nodded. "It matches the description. Blackstone Meridian's new majority investor." "God," the magnate breathed, glancing back at Miranda with something close to pity. Across the room, a senator's chief of staff leaned toward her boss. "Sir." "She's the one negotiating the corporate accountability reforms." The senator's posture tightened. And Miranda just insulted her in the middle of a White House floor. Word traveled through the room like an invisible current, connecting guests through widening eyes and stiffened spines. Every whisper added weight. Every realization pressed harder on Miranda's shoulders. But Miranda remained oblivious. Her husband, Charles Kessington, towering in a tailored midnight suit, finally broke from the cluster of officials, heading toward the confrontation with a stride that trembled despite its confidence. "Miranda," he hissed under his breath, "what have you done?" She whirled on him. "Don't. Start with me. I am cleaning up the standards of this event. Someone has to." Her voice rang much too loud for a room that had gone this quiet. Charles didn't respond. His eyes were locked on Solène, recognition settling over him like a shroud. He knew exactly who she was. He had spent 6 months trying to get a meeting with her. 10 months trying to stabilize the financial hemorrhage that threatened his entire portfolio. A full year ignoring the warnings that one wrong move could cost everything. And tonight, that wrong move had a name. Solène Ward. He turned pale. Miranda noticed. "What are you looking at?" she demanded. "Why are you staring at her like—" "Because she," he whispered, "is the woman holding the only lever that can keep us from collapsing." Miranda blinked, confused. "What lever?" $4.9 billion, he said flatly. The number hung in the air with a gravitational pull strong enough to bend the room around it. Guests stiffened. Someone gasped. A man near the staircase muttered, "Oh, hell." Miranda opened her mouth, then closed it. Shock beginning to thaw the frost of entitlement. "That can't be possible. She doesn't look." She stopped, because even she heard it, the prejudice in her own voice. And suddenly, she realized how loudly it echoed. Solène remained perfectly still, her emerald satin catching the chandelier light, her composure so immaculate it felt like an indictment. Charles swallowed hard and stepped toward her, bowing his head slightly, something he had never done to anyone at a gala in his life. "Miss Ward," he began, "please, there has been a misunderstanding." The room held still, even the air stilled. Solène looked at him. No anger, no satisfaction, just a calm so sharp it felt surgical. A calm that said she already knew the truth about his company's failing assets. A calm that said she knew exactly how many lifelines had already exhausted. A calm that said, "You needed my signature long before your wife needed my humiliation." Miranda watched her husband's desperation with dawning horror. "Charles, why are you talking to her like that?" she whispered. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Because in that moment, everyone understood. This wasn't a personal insult. This was a catastrophic miscalculation. A woman built from inherited power had just waged war on a woman who built her own. And the balance between them had already shifted past the point of return. The realization didn't hit Miranda all at once. It seeped in slow and suffocating like cold water rising around ankles too numb to move. Around her, the gilded hall shifted again. Not physically, but perceptibly. Guests, senators, donors, ambassadors, political strategists began exchanging looks heavy with subtext. Their expressions blended discomfort with a dawning awareness that they were standing inside a moment larger than the gala itself. Someone whispered, "She didn't just insult a guest." Another finished, "She insulted the woman holding their future." The murmur grew legs and circled the hall in soft, devastating beats. Miranda's chest tightened as she caught the stares. Not of solidarity, not of sympathy, of judgment. "Why is everyone looking at me like I've done something wrong?" she snapped, her voice thinner than before. Her answer came in the form of silence. Heavy. Accusing. Across the room, Charlotte's business partner William Ardens, a man usually unshakable, looked down at his phone, then up at Charles with an expression that was nothing short of alarm. He mouthed, "It's true?" Charles didn't reply. He simply closed his eyes. Miranda saw the exchange and felt panic finally break through her indignation. "Charles?" she asked, her voice cracking. "What is he talking about?" He didn't answer. Instead, he took another step toward Solène, slow, careful, like a man approaching the only surgeon capable of saving a collapsing heart. "Miss Ward," he said, swallowing the weight of disgrace. "Please. My wife didn't know who you were." Solène's expression didn't flicker. The words washed over her like water over stone. Behind them, several guests instinctively stepped back, giving the moment space or perhaps giving themselves distance from the Kessington fallout they sensed approaching. A White House cultural coordinator whispered to a colleague, "We need to notify staff. This may escalate." Her colleague shook his head. "It already has." Miranda turned sharply toward Charles. "You're making a fool of yourself," she hissed. "Do you have any idea how this looks?" Charles finally snapped, not loudly, but with a depth that silenced even those who weren't listening. "It looks," he said, voice low and shaking, "like the only person who can prevent our portfolio from collapsing is standing right in front of you, and you called her a prop." Miranda froze. A prop. The word echoed back into her ears with vicious clarity. The same word shed spit just minutes ago. A senator's wife caught her breath. The press correspondent lowered his phone, stunned. A security officer at the far wall shifted his stance, sensing the emotional implosion at the core of this high-profile confrontation. Miranda stepped back, stumbling slightly as her heel scraped the marble. "That's impossible," she whispered. "She can't be, she doesn't even, she's just..." But even she heard it. The prejudice, the entitlement, the rot beneath her assumptions. Solène didn't speak. She didn't have to. The truth sat between them. Miranda's insult wasn't only cruel, it was catastrophically ignorant. Charles forced a tight, broken breath. The entire financial committee has been trying to reach her for months. She controls the last viable acquisition path for our assets. She's the leverage we've been praying for. Miranda stared at her husband, face pale enough to blend with the marble statues watching them. "My God," she whispered. "You're telling me she's the one?" The hall answered with silence again. Solène lifted her head slightly, and the movement alone commanded more presence than any outburst Miranda could muster. The guests recognized it. Charles recognized it. Even the White House staff recognized it. Miranda's throat bobbed with a swallow she didn't finish. Because finally she understood the scale of her mistake. Not just socially, not just politically, not just personally, but financially, catastrophically, irreversibly. A storm she created with one sentence was already gathering speed, and Solène hadn't even lifted a finger. The hall didn't roar, it didn't erupt, it simply tightened, like air being pulled inward before a storm. Miranda stood frozen, her golden gown catching the chandelier light like a cracked monument. Charles looked as if gravity had suddenly doubled. Even the guests, polished, powerful, untouchable, seemed to brace themselves for something they could sense but not yet name. And at the center of it, Solène finally moved. Not dramatically, not vindictively, just a single, measured shift of her hand. She reached into the sleek emerald clutch at her side and withdrew a small obsidian black device, no larger than a credit card. Subtle, elegant, corporate, the kind of object that didn't need attention to command power. Miranda's breath hitched. What is she doing?" Charles didn't answer. He couldn't, because he already knew. Solène tapped the device once, a soft, discreet vibration, a blinking pulse of green light. And then, silence. A silence that was louder than any command. Charles stepped forward, panic cracking through the veneer of wealth. "Miss Ward, please, if there is something we can discuss." Her eyes lifted, not cruelly, not triumphantly, but with the level steadiness of someone acting within absolute right. She didn't speak to him. She didn't need to. Because right then, across the gala, phones buzzed. 1, then 3, then a dozen. A symphony of notifications that came staggered and devastatingly synchronized. A political consultant near the podium looked down at his screen, his face drained. "Hold on, did Kessington Global just freeze trading?" A banker next to him checked her own phone. "No, it's worse. Their credit lines just hit a review flag." Another notification chimed, then another, and another. Miranda turned in a frantic circle as murmurs grew sharper. "What's happening? Why are people looking at their phones?" "Charles, what is this?" But Charles was staring at Solène's device with the expression of a man watching his entire kingdom tilt toward collapse. He whispered, "She triggered it." Miranda blinked. "Triggered what?" "The automatic withdrawal protocol." His voice was barely audible. "The capital we've been depending on was conditional. She just pulled it. A beat." Then the hall erupted in whispers so heavy they felt like physical blows. A Treasury liaison gasped. "Oh my God, this affects federal contracts," a policy advisor muttered. "If those assets freeze, Half the companies on the East Wing list are exposed. A senior diplomat shook his head in disbelief. That's billions. Miranda backed away from Solène as though distance could undo her words. This can't be real, she whispered. She wouldn't do this. Not over, not over. Her eyes filled with dread. A misunderstanding, but the truth was sitting plainly between them. It wasn't punishment. It wasn't revenge. It was procedure. A safeguard she was always entitled to pull. Solène lowered the device back into her clutch, with a slow finality that silenced even the far corners of the room. Her composure wrapped around her like steel silk, unmoving, unbothered, unequivocal. And when she finally spoke, it wasn't to Miranda or Charles. It was to the room itself. Actions, she said softly, have consequences. Not loud, not sharp. Just true. Miranda's knees weakened. Charles grasped the back of a nearby chair to steady himself. Guests began stepping away from the Kessingtons not out of cruelty, but instinct. The way people step back from a building they sense is about to fall. And above them, the chandeliers flickered as if acknowledging the shift. Power had moved. Quietly. Irrevocably. And it was no longer theirs. The first scream didn't come from Miranda. It came from someone across the ballroom, a junior analyst from a global bank, whose phone lit up with alerts faster than he could read them. Oh no, this is live, this is happening now. His voice cracked through the Gala's golden calm like a fissure. And then the flood hit. Phones vibrated in pockets. Notification screens brightened the dim corners of the hall. Every few seconds, a new chime cut through the string quartet's attempt to resume playing. A cluster of guests gathered near the marble staircase, each expression more stricken than the last. Is this real-time freeze? Yes. How many assets? All of them. Charles braced himself against a marble column as more messages hit his phone like blows. Urgent. Kessington Global Credit Line flagged for immediate review notice. Automated capital retraction verified alert. Partner firms initiating precautionary halts. Federal contracts re-evaluation pending. His eyes blurred. This wasn't a crisis. This was an implosion. Miranda stumbled toward him. Charles, do something. Tell them to stop this. Fix it. He didn't answer. He couldn't. Because every attempt to drag in air felt like inhaling broken glass. Across the room, a hedge fund manager whispered into his earpiece, pale as chalk. Pull our exposure now. I don't care how it looks. Get us out. A diplomat turned to his assistant. Draft a statement. Something neutral. Something that distances us. Reporters hovered at the perimeter, not bold enough to start filming openly, but ready. Very ready. Everywhere Solène stood, the air seemed clearer. Everywhere the Kessingtons stood, the oxygen thinned. The hall had chosen its side. Miranda clutched her temples. This isn't happening. This can't be just because I said, just because of... She stopped. Because even her panic could not force the words out. She could not admit that a lifetime of privilege had taught her to underestimate women who looked like Solène. As more alerts chimed, she grabbed Charlotte's arm in desperation. What do they want from us? What do we do? Charles looked at her with hollow eyes. They don't want anything, Miranda. That's the point. None of this is negotiation. This is fallout. He squeezed his phone so hard it threatened to crack. He knew the numbers. A freeze like this didn't stop at the balance sheets. It rippled. Partners, vendors, contractors, regulators. Everyone touched by Kessington Global was immediately exposed. A senator walked past them, his tone clipped as he spoke into his phone. Inform Treasury. They need to see this chain reaction. Yes, immediately. Miranda grabbed him by the elbow. You can't just walk away. We've donated millions to your... He pulled his arm back without looking at her. Not enough to follow you off a cliff. Miranda's mouth hung open. Meanwhile, Solène remained exactly where she'd been since she triggered the withdrawal, standing beneath the chandelier light, emerald satin shimmering softly, untouched by chaos. A calm in the center of a financial hurricane. A cluster of guests began drifting toward her, not to speak, but to align themselves silently like planets gravitating toward a new sun. Respect, awe, and fear mixed in their eyes. No one dared approach the Kessingtons. A woman from the Federal Arts Committee whispered, She didn't shout. She didn't make a scene. Another replied, she didn't have to. Power doesn't need volume. Even the statues seemed to watch the collapse unfold with a kind of timeless judgment. Miranda, shaken to her core, looked back at Solène with disbelief. You did this, she whispered. A few words, and you destroyed everything. Solène met her gaze, unblinking. No, she replied softly. Your words destroyed themselves. I simply stopped protecting what wasn't mine to save. The chandeliers flickered, and in that flicker, the Kessington empire polished, towering, untouchable finally, fully cracked. The collapse did not stay contained within the marble walls of the Gala. It leaked first as whispers, then as alerts, then as a digital tidal wave sweeping outward from the White House, like shock waves from a controlled detonation. It began with a financial reporter who had been standing near the west staircase. She lifted her phone, blinked twice, then whispered, "Oh my God, it's already trending." Her colleague leaned in. Trending what? She turned the screen toward him. Number: Kessington crash. Number: Galagate. Number: who is she? Within seconds, screens across the room lit up with the same tags, multiplying faster than anyone could stop. A senator's aide muttered, "That was fast. Way too fast." His supervisor replied, "When the right people lose money, news doesn't wait." Guests who moments earlier had pretended not to record were now openly sharing footage of Miranda's insult videos framed with marble columns, chandeliers, and a crystallizing sense of horror. One clip captured Miranda pointing at Solène's chest, shouting, "You people don't belong here," her voice clear enough to cut glass. Another captured Solène's stillness. That calm, eerily serene, in contrast, was now going viral frame by frame. A journalist viewing the clip whispered, "She doesn't even flinch. That's unreal." Her partner replied, "That's power. That's real power." Meanwhile, more alerts hit the Gala like raindrops turning into hail. Breaking. Kessington Global Stock Trading halted. Breaking. Multiple firms suspend partnership with Kessington Holdings. Breaking. Treasury requests emergency review of contracts. Charles read the headlines with the stare of a man drowning in slow motion. Miranda clutched his shoulder with trembling hands. "Tell them it's a misunderstanding," she pleaded. "Tell them I didn't mean, tell them to take it down, tell them." But Charles couldn't speak. He had already fallen behind the speed of the collapse. And the crowd? They had shifted entirely. Those who once orbited the Kessingtons now drifted away like debris from a sinking ship. Those who once ignored Solène now observed her with silent respect, some even with awe. A congressman approached a fellow donor. Was that really Solène Ward? Yes. The Solène Ward? Yes. He exhaled slowly. Then this fallout will be biblical. Even staffers trained to remain neutral decor stood straighter around her, instinctively recognizing the gravitational pull of someone who didn't demand power but commanded it. A foreign diplomat whispered to his interpreter, "Take note of her name. Anyone who can cripple a billionaire in minutes is someone we need on our list." In a far corner, a cluster of young interns replayed the footage in disbelief. She didn't yell. She didn't argue. She barely even spoke. So how did she? Because some people don't raise their voices. They raise the stakes. The Gala was no longer a celebration. It was a live broadcast of a dynasty falling. Miranda finally broke. She gripped the edge of a pedestal, her breath quivering. "This will ruin us," she whispered. "They'll tear us apart." No one contradicted her, because the truth was already out in the open gloss of the marble floors. The Kessingtons weren't simply embarrassed. They weren't simply exposed. They were finished. What Miranda had done was not a scandal. It was a catalyst. And the footage spreading across the country now showed a story that would outlive the walls of the Gala. A wealthy woman humiliating a black guest, and the black guest quietly dismantling her entire empire with a single, lawful decision. The nation didn't need context. The visuals told all. Someone near the entrance murmured, "She just rewrote the hierarchy of this room." Another replied, "Not the room, the industry." As more news updates flashed across screens, one notification rose above the rest. Breaking. $4.9 B in contracts and assets. Confirmed frozen pending further review. Miranda's hand flew to her mouth. Her knees buckled. Charles caught her barely. The crowd didn't gasp. They expected it. The aftershock had reached its terminal point. And at the eye of it all stood Solène Ward, still, composed, untouchable as the world tilted around her, realigning itself without needing her to lift another finger. The collapse had left the Kessingtons in ruins. The internet had already crowned its interpretation. And the Gala had transformed into a monument of consequences. But the night was not done, not yet, because there was still the matter of what Solène would do next. The storm outside the White House Gala, digital, financial, political, raged without restraint. But inside the marble hall, something else shifted. Not chaos, not collapse, but clarity. The kind that settles after a disaster reveals what was always fragile to begin with. Guests continued reading the fallout on their phones, but their eyes were no longer wide with shock. They were attentive, waiting, watching, because everyone in that gold-lit chamber understood one thing. The next move belonged to Solène Ward, and she made it without a speech, without theatrics, without even raising her voice. She simply reached into her clutch, not for the device that had triggered the financial implosion, not for her phone, but for a white envelope, unassuming, slim, sealed with a small green wax crest that caught the light like a soft emerald flame. A hush washed across the room. Miranda stared at it, bewildered. What is that?" Solène didn't look at her. She stepped past Miranda as if she were a statue, as if her shouting and her entitlement and her collapse meant nothing. Not out of cruelty, out of insignificance. The entire room parted for her without being told, like a tide bowing to the moon. Solène approached the event coordinator, a woman in a dark, formal blazer who had been watching the entire meltdown with the expression of someone forced to memorize history in real time. "Miss Ward," she said softly, bowing her head out of instinct rather than protocol, "how can we help you?" Solène placed the envelope in her hands. "This belongs to the nation's people," she said, her tone quiet but resonant. "Not to the ones who mistake power for permission." The coordinator blinked, confused. Then she opened it. Her breath left her body in one sharp exhale. Inside was documentation signed, sealed, already registered, confirming a multi-million-dollar donation, not to the White House, not to any private foundation, not to any organization with ties to the Kessingtons or their circle, but to community STEM programs, scholarships for underrepresented students, arts funding for public schools, small business incubators run by Black and minority founders, mental health and housing initiatives for underserved neighborhoods. Coordinator's eyes watered. This is extraordinary," she whispered. Across the room, a senator murmured, "That's more than any donor here has ever pledged." A lobbyist added quietly, "She didn't just freeze the Kessington empire, she redirected it." The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Solène didn't burn wealth, she reassigned it. She didn't retaliate with destruction, she responded with distribution. That was the difference between vengeance and justice. And the room felt the distinction like a shift in atmospheric pressure. Miranda stumbled forward, desperate. "You're donating? After all this?" "After what?" Her voice cracked. "You're making us look like monsters." A few guests turned sharply, offended by her phrasing. Solène finally gave Miranda a single glance, a razor-thin slice of calm that dismantled whatever illusion Miranda had left. "You did that," Solène said. "I'm simply choosing what kind of world I want to live in after the dust settles." Miranda's lips trembled. She looked around the room, seeking allies. She found none. Even Charles, broken by the weight of the collapse, didn't move to defend her. He looked at Solène with regret, not resentment. The coordinator cleared her throat, visibly moved. "Miss Ward, this will change lives." Solène offered a slight nod, nothing more. "It should." The words fell gently, but they spread like a ripple. A journalist murmured, "She dismantled a fortune and built a future in its place." A policy advisor whispered, "This isn't revenge, it's recalibration." A donor breathed, "This is what real influence looks like." The air in the Gala, once sparkling with arrogance and power games, now shimmered with something else, something rare: integrity. Guests straightened their posture. Some gave Solène a respectful nod. Others stepped aside with genuine humility. And somewhere in the back, one young intern whispered to another, "She didn't come here to win. She came here to remind them what winning actually means." In the center of the hall, under the soft glow of the chandelier, the envelope now held by the coordinator seemed to gleam brighter than any diamond in the room. Redistribution wasn't a gesture. It was a declaration. And everyone understood it. Solène Ward had not just erased $4.9 billion from a collapsing empire, she had reassigned purpose to the world it left behind. The fallout was nearly done. Only one final act remained. The gala never truly returned to harmony. Even after the music resumed, soft, trembling, unsure, the energy remained fractured, as if every chandelier crystal held the reflection of what had just unfolded. But Solène didn't stay to watch the aftermath. She turned away from the stunned crowd, her emerald satin catching the last warm flicker of the chandeliers, and began the quiet walk toward the east exit. No flourish. No entourage. No need for a dramatic pause. Her presence itself had already altered the geometry of the room. People stepped aside before she reached them, not out of fear, not out of guilt, but out of respect, earned in real time. Behind her, the Kessingtons stood like the ruins of a toppled monument. Charles, gripping a railing as if it might hold back the financial abyss, now swallowing his empire, Miranda collapsing inward, not from anger anymore, but from the realization that her world had a fault line named arrogance, and she had jumped on it. They didn't call after Solène. They couldn't. The right to speak to her had dissolved the moment their own words shattered the illusion of their power. A White House aide opened the tall glass doors for her. Cold dawn air rushed in, blue, soft, honest. The kind of air that felt like it belonged to people who earned their place, not inherited it. Solène stepped out. The marble steps glowed faintly in the pale light, and her silhouette cut a clean line across the horizon, steady, unbent, untouchable. Behind her, the sounds of frantic phone calls, scrambling advisors, and collapsing fortunes blurred into a distant hum. Out here, the world was quiet again. She breathed once slow, measured as if closing a chapter not with triumph, but with certainty. Justice for her had never been about destruction. It had always been about alignment, and tonight, everything aligned. With the first hint of sunrise washing over her shoulders, she descended the final step, leaving the White House behind her like a stage dimming after the final act. The night belonged to consequences, but the dawn belonged to her.